will be a multi-part episode.
I will volunteer my time to help organize our thinking, but John and I decided we wanted to get through these 2 white papers as the foundation of understanding. And
yeah, this is our first crack at making a podcast here, so we'll get better at organization. But
well, this is organization. It's organized around these papers that are so, even though it's 10 years old and 6 years old, it's groundbreaking stuff. It changes how everything works, or will change. Anyway, the invitation is to have people participate, understand.
Here we were talking about privacy. So bullet point 10 in the white paper is called privacy. So I made a note. So the public can see that someone is sending an amount to someone else, but without information linking the transaction to anyone. This is similar to the level of information released by stock exchanges, where the time and size of individual trades is made public, but without telling who the parties were.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. That's exactly.
Yeah. So in practice, we've found that what is called KYC, or know your customer, became a thing very quickly. So when you are going from fiat money, which is the US dollar, or many other government currencies, which are not backed, fiat is just a way of saying that it's not actually backed by anything. But the KYC, know your customer, became a thing that, especially in the US, saying all of these cryptocurrency exchanges, you have to know your customer. And so that is now linking you to a wallet. So if I want to go on Coinbase and take my money out of Coinbase and send it to my Ethereum wallet or my Bitcoin wallet, now my personal information is linked to my exchange on Coinbase. So now the government can say, oh, okay, well, you're linked there and you send the money to this address and this address. So in practice, the privacy is not really there yet. They're still working on ways, but
but you can buy direct. You can buy right on Bitcoin.
But how?
You get your own code. So I'm not entirely sure it worked, but I do have some.
But how did you buy it with a credit card? How did you get your US dollars into Bitcoin without using an exchange?
It's years ago, John. I don't remember.
You have to use an exchange. Unless you did some, bartering with somebody.
But I have Coinbase and I have Bitcoin, and not that I want to announce that.
There was a time when
we might have to edit this part out.
That's not everybody should have a coin, but even if you don't have any cryptocurrency, make a Coinbase account, make a Gemini account. Just try them out. They're exchanges. But that is how you would get your US dollars into cryptocurrency. And when they first started, they didn't require you to put any identifying, you didn't have to give your name or address or any of that. But then know your customer, KYC laws came out, and now all the exchanges have to have that information. So if I want to purchase or if I want to do anything with these exchanges, I have to give them my information. Now, I usually move, if I'm going to buy Bitcoin, I buy some from the exchange and then I move it off to my own wallet. But that wallet is now linked to that exchange, and they can see, okay, well, you bought this Bitcoin, you sent it to this address, and they can see where I've done everything from there.
Well, this is the whole concern about taxation and that the whole legal
and privacy. And then, right. It's not as private as a lot of people think. There are what are called mixers. So if you are doing illegal activity with your Bitcoin, you probably send it through a mixer, which obfuscates what you're actually doing by making a ton of different transactions. I've never actually tried them because I'm not worried about that. But I do worry about privacy. And so that brings into, eventually we should get into Monero, which is another cryptocurrency that is specifically about privacy. And I will have to do some research on that because I don't know exactly how they do it. But their whole narrative is that they're a privacy coin. And whereas Bitcoin can be tracked and traced incredibly easily by anyone, Monero is not able to be tracked. So that'll be another specific episode.
Well, in the midst of that, I did find a key that I had. When I set up my first account, it was a direct Bitcoin account. I can't remember honestly. So this is kind of a, confession, but I can't remember how much or if I put money in, but I definitely had the account set up and I found a key, but I have destroyed 2 computers. I don't think it was on either of those because those were legacy old ones. So I have one left computer that I think it may be residing on. So I don't know, at the day, probably 2013, I bought $100 worth or $500. So I don't know that even at today's rate of Bitcoin, it wouldn't be worth that much money.
And back then, I guess I'm not familiar with how things worked back then. I started paying attention in 2017, and that's about when, from my recollection, that's when most of these exchanges had to have KYC, the know your customer rules were in place.
Well, and I didn't know that happened. That's interesting. I mean, that's important to know, because I like the privacy value of it.
And there's a lot of people in the cryptocurrency communities that were not happy at all. They're like, know your customer. We don't like those rules. But I mean, that's governments want to know what's going on. So it makes sense that they enacted these laws.
Well, I know you can walk into Coinstar, the local Kroger, and they have Bitcoin, so you can pound coins into it and get Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how that works because you're right, that would be a way.
With cash.
And there's Bitcoin ATMs, and I'm not sure how they work either.
So these are all things we can explore, and
Yeah, and I think we should absolutely do a specific episode on KYC and how that came about, and privacy. Those are all things we should explore for sure. So, all right, let's get back up here. Where can we go to next here? So we're cryptographic proofs. All right, so let's see this one. Transactions that are computationally impractical to reverse would protect sellers from fraud, and routine escrow mechanisms could easily be implemented to protect buyers.
Right. So you might not get this in terms of, I'm customer facing in the financial business. So this could be anything from your auto insurance to life insurance to your home, any this is the asset protection piece of Ethereum and Bitcoin and all of that. Meaning for me, it's the contract that would go with it. Now, I know we're talking about Bitcoin, and so it's not as contract oriented, but still the transaction to me is you're exchanging one asset for another. If you buy life insurance and then you die, you want to get paid. And so where they've had people that I'll give you one simple example. There's something in the business called viatical settlements. Nobody thinks about it. Well, you pre-sell your life insurance. So this would put a stop to that, because maybe what I would do if I was working with someone to help develop a well thought out Ethereum for like life insurance is I would say you would want to put in a couple different stops. I'd want an older person who is maybe struggling mentally to not be taken advantage of by having the power of attorneys, the right other people that they sign up. When they sign up for the life insurance, you say, yes, my spouse and my nephew John get signed up as official people that can help look over my shoulder. Because in today we have criminals that take from people and they convert these policies, and some of it's good and helpful, and that's why they exist, but plenty of it has been known places where people get taken advantage of. So for me, this is one of many things. And so when I think of the BOA, John, the BOA complaining that the power for the
is
Bitcoin
using more power than American Airlines.
It's so ridiculous to me, because I'm like, how much energy goes in to chasing a criminal and trying to resurrect somebody's bank account, their life savings? And we're talking about changing that. Why would we not want that done? I anytime I bring this up with people and I use different examples, usually it's with people in the industry, and most of the people in the industry are fighting this. Like I've had people just tell me that's not going to be a thing. I've been told that. You're an idiot for following it. It's not going to be a thing. Well, I'm here to tell you.
I mean, I think there's
if-
lots of people out there with that opinion. I think they're wrong, but
I think they are. Yeah.
and I think this excerpt from the Bitcoin white paper, I think, is actually a foreshadowing of smart contracts in Ethereum. It's very, very much so. So that's something we'll get into later. And once we finish this Bitcoin white paper episode, the next thing is going to be the Ethereum white paper.
Maybe we can come back and as we do other episodes, if people like it and they can, like it or tell us that they like it, we could come back to this and put which episode they could follow up the more detailed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of information to go into.
Yes.
So let's see. Trusted central authority. How about you start with your note there?
Let's see. So the problem, of course,
is
can't verify that one of the owners did not double spend the coin. So we're back to that. A common solution is to introduce a trusted central authority, or mint, that checks every transaction. So my comment is this is not a solution, but an evolution of the current banking system. Meaning,
yeah, I think this is just him explaining the current banking system. Actually, I think I read that wrong.
Well, no,
he's just saying like.
But I think it's a useful, because it's not going to replace. It's going to replace banking, but it's an evolution of it because you're still going to have those transactions. You're still going to put money in and take money out. You're going to trust this over the bank, and so in that regard, it's an evolution of it. It's not a complete replacement of it.
Yeah, and so I think. I forget if we talk about this somewhere else, but so that trusted central authority, essentially you're trusting, banks to trusting the network, the Bitcoin network or the Ethereum network. So like you said, a lot of people, trustless is a big word thrown around a lot, but you're still trusting something. You're trusting most people aren't able to audit the code of Bitcoin, and a lot of people don't understand how it works. So you're trusting the network and the people that built it, that it does what they say it does. And I think that becomes even more important with all the other cryptocurrencies and altcoins out there once you get past Bitcoin and into Ethereum.
I can see that the moment of enthusiasm when they wrote this and they think about coining the phrase trustless, that sounds cool and nifty, which I have a bias, programmers seem to like cool and nifty, right? I mean, that's why we have such crazy names in that industry. But I think the reality is what you said. People are going to trust it, and they're only going to trust it if they can see it clearly going to deliver what they expect. Because if you can't deliver what they expect, they will not use it. So trust or not.
And just a note on this, you said when they wrote this, nobody actually knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. A lot of people have, guesses and ideas. There have been some people that have claimed to be Satoshi. Some people think it's a group of people that wrote this paper, but to this day, nobody knows for sure who wrote this and released it, or who Satoshi Nakamoto is.
Sounds like the Loch Ness Monster.
There actually is like quite a lot of. I think that will be its own episode of going over the mythos of who Satoshi is, and because there's actually a lot of interesting. There have been all sorts of just weird things that have happened over the years of people claiming to be Satoshi, and conspiracy theories and all sorts of stuff. So I think that would be a fun episode just to have some fun about. There's some mystery around this stuff, which is kind of fun.
Well, there's an email published as part of the paper, so you could start there, right?
It hasn't been used in years. Like that's part of it. Like he's on forums, and then all of a sudden he disappears at one point, and I think that'll be its own episode. But there's a lot of mystery around Satoshi Nakamoto. So all right, we'll get back to that later. So here's another one that I highlighted. The payee needs proof that at the time of each transaction, the majority of nodes agreed it was the first received. So this is kind of that double spend thing in the 51% attack. And that's where we kind of need to do more research of how exactly that works. Because, he's saying that the payee needs proof at the time of transaction that the majority of nodes, and that's where that 51% comes from. 51% is the majority. So if 51% of that network says that transaction was the first one received, then that's the transaction that will be included in the blockchain. But yeah, I think a good follow-up to this episode will be figuring out how exactly did it solve that double spend problem.
Again, if there's people out there that know and can talk through the actual function of it, because once I get into the detail, if we actually have somebody that has major detail, we can start to ask questions about, well, what about this and where does that fail, right? Because as we know, this stuff fails like everything else. So
do you want to read this next one?
sure. I thought this was particularly interesting. As I read it, I thought, wow, timestamp, what a simple solution, right? I mean, as a lean thinker, you're always trying to improve process.
And I noticed that that's one of the things actually at the very bottom, he has references, and he actually references another scientific paper about how time stamping works and how it's trusted. So that'd be interesting to actually look at the references at some point and see, what he's referencing. Because Bitcoin was not created in a bubble. There was a lot of things that came before Bitcoin.
Before it happened.
They built on these things. So
I'll read this and then my comment for those who don't have video. The timestamp proves that the data must have existed at the time. Obviously, in order to get into the hash, each timestamp includes the previous timestamp in its hash, forming a chain. And that's what I was referring to at the very beginning. When I read that, I was like, oh, you can't create the next one without the last one. And I think that's really cool. And then with each additional timestamp reinforcing the ones before it. And so I have a lot to learn. I'm leaping to conclusions, but for me, and my comment was, this is a key element to making a single transaction known to everyone and, moving it along securely.
So that hash you see in this diagram, that goes back to this SHA 256. This is the hash.
And the first one who creates that is the one who gets paid. And then I'm assuming, jump to a conclusion, that then is the timestamp on that block.
Yeah, so that's the algorithm that all these miners are trying to solve. And the first one that gets it right, and then everybody else verifies it, they're like, oh yes, you got the right. And that goes back to, the input is the transactions, these items here inside the block, the hash, and then the difficulty, the nonce is what affects the difficulty in creating that. But essentially then once one of the miners gets that correct calculation, says, yes, I have the right answer, all the rest of them can check it very quickly and be like, oh yes, you do have the right answer. Boom. That's the block. You get your Bitcoin onto the next one. And so that's.
Yeah. I mean, it's so simple. It's really ridiculous, but I think simple is something that will last a long time. All right.
Well, and that's I think a lot of people get really thinking that, these cryptocurrencies are incredibly complex. There's certainly complexity to them, but they've really tried in a lot of instances to make these simple concepts. And obviously there's complexity involved, but you don't necessarily need to understand all of that to understand how it works. So next one, we're at bullet point 4, proof of work. And I just noticed here, Adam Back's Hashcash. This is another one that he references. And this is just, highlighting that, Bitcoin wasn't something that was just created. It is an iteration of things that have been building for a long time and came out of a lot of other people's work.
Yeah, it might be interesting over time if we have an opportunity to look at some of that history, because I don't know it. For me, it
Yeah.
just fell out of the sky. I,
And that's what a lot of people think. They're like, oh yeah, how can I trust this Bitcoin? It's just, just somebody decided that they can make money one day, when there's really actually a lot of history that's gone into it. And I find that fascinating. I love learning about that stuff. There was a time when I thought Bitcoin didn't come from anything, and then I was like, oh no, actually, there are a lot of people working on digital cash and all sorts of stuff. Um, so we'll definitely do an episode on before Bitcoin.
before Bitcoin, BBC. And so the next one was mine. You said yes to it. So if a majority, this is from the white paper, if a majority of CPU power is controlled by honest nodes, the honest chain will grow the fastest, outpace any competing chains. And the competing chains, I'm assuming, is the threat to the overall legitimate blockchain. So I said, can we explore that? Explore what this means exactly. Are you up on this?
Yeah, so that would going back to here, creating that computation that the miners are trying to do to create the next block. If you were to,
I mean, like for me, I'd like to see it blown up in gory detail because that's how my brain works. And I don't have that. So for me, part of this is to be able to see that, because then I can think through more clearly if I'm going to help someone build transactions around it to replace legacy old stuff. It would help me to understand that, you know?
yeah, I think this goes back to the 51% attack. But to be able to do that, you're essentially competing with everybody else in the world that is running one of these miners.
I mean, like as an example, so I'll just use an analogy. On my Apple, I don't really worry too much about the threats to the machinery, because as long as I use what Apple has approved in terms of vendors, then I know that my machine is, reasonably safe. So I don't use other spyware and all that. I know if I had a Microsoft machine, then Norton is what I would use. Do you see this as individuals that are getting into this? I'm speaking more of like larger organizations that want to join and get in and start to participate and replace their old legacy systems. Do you think that they'll have to have their own security needs, like a Microsoft kind of environment? And I'm not picking on Microsoft, but that's where Norton is super valuable. There's a niche there for protection. Or do you think it'll be more like an Apple where, yep, you have to be smart about it, but it doesn't have to be, you're not going to have to install and watch, build out your own apps to keep for your own security. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, as far as Bitcoin goes, I don't think that's like the users. What you need to protect is your private key for your wallet. You need to secure your wallet. As far as the network goes, it's much more, in your analogy, much more the Mac. You're not worrying about securing the network in Bitcoin, unless you're a miner, but then you're probably doing that mostly to make money. And so that's where creating the incentive is, that you want people to be incentivized to be good actors, and in that way securing the network. So you need to make it very not profitable to attack the network.
What about large companies, large organizations who have complete security staff? Right,
Well,
I'm
if they're
talking,
they're going to be creating their own blockchain or using something built on Ethereum. If they're trying to if they need something with a ledger, they're not going to be doing Bitcoin. So at that point, if they're creating their own blockchain, that they're wanting to create a ledger or something, that's kind of a different conversation. um,
well, I just ask, and maybe this is obviously, it's more that we'll explore, but if I'm CEO or CIO of a large hospital organization or insurance company or bank? That's a question I got to ask, and I got to have solid answers. And that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. I'm trying to look under the carpet, where are the bones buried? Everybody's going to tell me it's a great day. But storms roll in every day. So
yeah, I think that's much more a conversation when we get into Ethereum. We can explore that a lot more. For Bitcoin, you're not really going to have large corporations doing anything on Bitcoin aside from maybe if they want to, own some Bitcoin. Like Tesla, they bought what, 1.5 billion,
was it million?
1.5 billion. I think he bought some more actually. But they're just putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets because they think it's going to increase in value, which is true, or has been true.
I'll just comment for myself. I don't see Bitcoin as an investment. I know it has been, and I know plenty, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it'll stabilize at some point and will no longer be an investment. It will be a currency, and you'll exchange it just like you do the Canadian dollar and the US dollar. And so once it stabilizes, now how long it takes to stabilize, I guess that's anybody's guess.
Now, I think I'm going to disagree with you there just by knowing the technical nature of Bitcoin. It really is not friendly as a means of transaction. When we start talking about more currencies, we can talk about Bitcoin Cash. And essentially what Bitcoin Cash, it was a fork of Bitcoin. There's been quite a few forks of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin, there's a lot of politics involved. And at one point they put a hard cap on the block size of 1 megabyte, which means that you can only have so many transactions in there before the block is full. And that has increased transaction fees. So now to move around your Bitcoin can be quite costly, and it also takes a long time. Bitcoin Cash got away, got rid of the 1 megabyte cap on the block size. So now the block can be however large it needs to be to fit all the transactions. So Bitcoin Cash's narrative is that they are trying to be closer to the initial Bitcoin white paper. And I don't know.
What I don't know.
I'm not.
Bitcoin Cash was more in line with, at least my thinking, it was more in line with Ethereum. The fact that they wanted it to be more transactional in nature.
Yeah, so that's Bitcoin Cash's narrative, is that that can be transactional, very, very low fees, very fast time. And so that's something that could be potentially used as a currency. There's so much tribalism in cryptocurrency that the BTC people hate the BCH people and vice versa. Or, you're a Bitcoin maximalist or you're a Bitcoin Cash maximalist. So it's hard to sometimes determine, those two camps are always attacking each other. And it can be hard to determine what is true and what is, they're just saying that to make the other coin look bad.
But you think Bitcoin itself is an investment?
I think right now its narrative is that it's a store of value investment similar to gold, digital gold. And I don't see that changing anytime soon.
I guess I think of that as a statement about it being like a store of gold. Well, that was what the US dollar was based on, and economics around that meant, you couldn't just do what the Federal Reserve is doing, which is printing $7 trillion this year. Wahoo, spending spree. And I think that's why I think so. My 2-second prognostication would be, my guess would be, in a year, 2, 3, 5, the Bitcoin, if it's Bitcoin, well, let me put it this way: whether it's Bitcoin or some other digital exchangeable medium, that will grow to the extent people will use it. And the more anyone will agree to use it, the more it will replace the dollar. And I almost wonder if, there's some interest in that. Anyway, So
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And I think that gets into Ethereum and the DeFi space, which is decentralized finance. And there are things, stable coins that are pegged to the dollar. You have DAI, you have USDC, and
right,
all
but
of these.
the key to me that I like about Bitcoin, and maybe there's other ones, is that it is, and the phrase gold is important because it's limited. My understanding is Bitcoin is limited, so there's only so much of it, and then it starts to divide itself. And in that regard, it's like any other precious metal or something else. It's limited. In that regard, it goes up. But what's more important to me is that it's exchangeable in an easy fashion. Now, you know,
And that's one of the problems with Bitcoin right now is
hard
it's
to
really
exchange.
not. Those transaction fees can be 20, 30, $40. Just very, very high. Um, and that's why I think, and I'm not the only one that thinks, but the narrative is definitely that Bitcoin is a digital gold right now.
So it would be fun to make one of the podcasts or a side one, or find somebody that's already done the math, but I can do the math. I mean, this is what I've lived, to actually see, well, when people say, oh, the fees are high. Well, I don't know. We went to Cuba and we spent on, I don't know, a few $1,000s. We spent probably 7%, 4% to exchange for peso to go to Cuba. And then we exchanged the same 7% fee to come back. So, right. I
But you
mean,
did that with a lot of money. If you were buying a $7 cup of coffee and you have a $30 transaction fee,
oh, got it.
right?
No
Right. That
study,
transaction fee does not scale.
no study necessary. Yeah, I get it. Okay. Yeah, good to know.
So that's where, unless you're transacting a lot of money on Bitcoin, that fee, it's not going to be used in daily use, because nobody's going to buy a $5 cup of coffee if they have to pay $40 in transaction fees on top of that. And that's kind of where Bitcoin is at. And which is why there have been forks of Bitcoin, such as Bitcoin Cash, and there have been some others as well. I like Bitcoin Cash, but I think I'm also concerned about it. It's more susceptible to a 51% attack, and there's just a lot of yeah, posts out there that I'm not sold on Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, but I those are the two that I think.
Maybe it's a good segue to the Ethereum, which is, presumably our next podcast. If we don't break this one into three. But so is that a good segue for Ethereum and why you like that over Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ethereum offers many more usable opportunities. And so just a quick thing, Ethereum came out of Bitcoin. Ethereum started in 2013, but Vitalik Buterin was
launched in 15.
Yeah, exactly. But he was working on Bitcoin, and then he decided to create his own. And Ethereum is a cryptocurrency, but also has the Ethereum virtual machine, which is a decentralized computer that can execute code, but that code isn't run on a server that's in some company's data center. It's run on nodes that are all over the globe in a decentralized manner. So it's code that can't be stopped. Is kind of a way to think of it. And there'll be a lot more to talk about when we get to Ethereum. That's definitely what I'm more interested in. So while I do think Bitcoin has value, I'm much more interested in what Ethereum has created.
I like it.
So let's get a couple more of our comments here. I think we're only halfway through this.
Yeah. Do you want to take a pause and come back? We could do some more, because we're an hour and a half already. So that's 3 episodes.
I was trying to see how long we've been going. Has it been that long?
Yeah.
All right. And I thought we'd be able to get through the Bitcoin paper in 40 minutes. Obviously, that was
Well, I could tell from, so maybe we should sign off. You can edit this end piece and then either rejoin and pick a date, but that'll make it easier for your editing. Um, So why don't you make a final comment that, however you want to wrap it up, just mentally for your own video, and I'll just sit here and be quiet, delete the last minute, and then,
Okay.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just we'll come back to this. But for people watching, if you want to check out the link in the show notes to check out this document, add some comments to what we've commented, and we'll get back to finishing the Bitcoin paper, and then we can get on to Ethereum as well. Yeah, we still have half of this to go. Where did we get to?
5. We were on 5,
We're on 5.
right there.
Okay.
Right, so we can come back and pick up at 5.
Yeah.
It's been super helpful for me, John. I'm glad you wanted to put this together. And, you know, again, for me, my interest is to apply lean, continuous improvement, to the financial space that's going to be most impacted, and to do that in the most efficient way we can by, you know, bringing a deeper understanding of how this stuff works and what it means. And I'm by no means an expert. I'm here trailing along, and John and I want to learn and bring anybody along who wants to. That's sort of the goal, right?
Yeah, I think that's great. We're learning through this as well. You know, I've been researching. I read about this stuff every day since 2017. I started to learn about it, and the more I learn, the more interested I am. So we're going through the learning process here and trying to tell you what we know and learn some more along the way. So check out the link and join our notes here, and we'd love to know what other people's thoughts are on these as well.